Good morning, YouTube. Deacon Do here with today's Bible study. And today we're looking at the book of Isaiah, chapter 40, verses 7 and 8. And there's two themes here with sort of the same visual, okay? So starting in verse 7, the grass withers, the flower fades, because the breath of the Lord blows upon it. Continuing in verse 8, the grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God stands forever. So let's first look at verse 7, where verse 7 is really talking about, you know, God's wrath on the wicked, right? Not, or even better yet, not wrath, but maybe judgment on the wicked, right? The grass withers, the flower fades, because the breath of the Lord blows upon it. And so this is a visual of, a field with grass and flowers in it, and that God's judgment, God's wrath, is really ultimately what is what I don't want to say it's what separates you from God. It's what keeps you from having everlasting life. It's God's judgment. It's God's wrath. But we continue to verse 8 with the same visual of the grass withering and the flowers of the field fading. But the word of our God stands forever. And it doesn't matter what's going on in the world. It doesn't matter you know, if culture's leaning one way or another, if, culture's twisting something one way or another. It doesn't matter. God's word endures forever, lasts forever. And it actually reminds me of the very beginning of the introduction to Thomas Paine's Common Sense. And for those of you who don't know what that is a pamphlet that Thomas Paine put together to try to convince the colonies back in the 1770s that they needed to leave the crown, that they needed to gain their independence. And so the very first paragraph of that introduction reads like this: perhaps the sentiments contained in the following pages are not yet sufficiently fashionable to procure them general favor. A long habit of not thinking a thing wrong gives it a superficial appearance of being right, and raises at first a formidable outcry in defense of custom. But the tumult soon subsides. Time makes more converts than reason. And so how this relates to especially verse 8 is no matter what culture does, if culture says, we're going to accept this, this is not wrong, people start to think, all right, this is right, this is right, this is right. But eventually, God's word is going to endure. God's word is going to tell you, hey, this is not right. You should not do this. Society may say, oh, that's innocent. That's an innocent sin. God's word says, no, that's a sin that keeps you from knowing me, from knowing God, and ultimately will lead to our death, our everlasting death with separation from God. And so what Thomas Paine's really saying here, of course, is, hey, look, a lot of you people may not think that revolution is right, and this may not be the time for it, but the more you ignore it and the more you think this is okay, that it's not wrong, the more you're going to think it's right. And no matter what I tell you, you're going to have your opinion, but eventually time is going to convert you. And again, that relates to God's word because especially when we're younger, we think we know everything. We can do this, we can do this, we can do this. And in our life, things are going to ebb and flow. And no matter what, God's word is consistent. God's guidance is going to give us that, that weather bell of where we should be, of what we should be doing, of how we should live. And so no matter what society does, no matter what society says, ultimately, God's word endures and God's judgment is the final judgment. All right, until next time, take care of yourselves and each other and have a blessed day. Bye-bye.